What we're going to be talking about today is music for video professionals, which basically means what do you need to know if you are going to be working in a creative music environment as regards synchronizing music to video in a lot of different ways. So let me share my screen, and let me begin by telling you we're going to start with a little bit of a presentation. The presentation is a keynote presentation that we're going to go through just a little bit of, and when we're done with the presentation, I'm actually going to segue into a live demonstration of what really goes on inside of Logic Pro. If you're familiar with Logic, you may recognize the interface. If you're not, I'm going to try to demystify it a little bit for you, because I know if it's the first time you see Logic, it's going to look like, what the heck is that? If you're not really familiar with what it is that I've done, although Larry has given you a brilliant sort of introduction, thank you very much for that, Larry. I am an Apple certified trainer. I am the digital guy because I have probably passed more ones and zeros through my life since the time I started doing this digital stuff, and that was back in 1985 was when I started doing digital music productions. And when I come out to Los Angeles in 1990, I got heavily into music for about a year or so from a scoring standpoint, and then segued into film and television post-production, which I did for about 15 years. I've been a supervising sound editor, although this slide does not say that. I have won Golden Reel Awards. I have been nominated for Oscars, and Larry doesn't even know this, for the sound on a wonderful little program called Robot Chicken, which you probably may have seen. I'm an author of a couple of books. Many years ago, I wrote the class textbook for a class that I taught at my alma mater, Wayne State University, and it had to do with multi-track recording in the studio, and the book was called Recording and Electronic Techniques for Musicians. It's out of print, but it's out there, and the interesting story for you all is I wrote it on a 128K brand new, at the time, 1984 Macintosh, and did all the artwork in Mac Paint. It was probably the first book this publisher had ever seen delivered on 3.5-inch floppy disks. And they were a little frustrated for the second, but they finally figured it out. And the information that you're going to get today has great insight into it because I've done this for many, many years. I've worked in this industry. I've been a film composer. I have scored major feature films. We're going to see a little bit of one today. I have done source music. I have produced records. I've done all of these things that I'm going to tell you about. So I'm not just a teacher teaching you. I'm giving you how it really works in the industry. And hopefully, most people have said this is invaluable insight, and I'm sure that you will find it to be true. So let's start off with this, music for video professionals. If you think you know music, you may be wrong. You may know a little bit about it, but you may not know the entire depth of issues that are there. Because when you synchronize music to picture, there are many hidden issues that come into the fray. A lot of them are rights management issues, and we're going to cover that extensively. These rights management issues can actually hurt you financially if you do not know about them and if you blunder through without taking the appropriate steps to license things correctly. Luckily, most of these issues for you can be solved pretty easily if in advance of any kind of release of what you're working on, someone does the right thing and contacts the music publisher. Now, I know most of you know about writers because those are the folks that create notes or score films and whatever. But what you may not know is that the writer is one half of the team. There is a publisher or a publishing company, maybe owned by the writer, but it may be not, maybe a separate company. And this is especially true in the film and video industry because 99.5% of the time, the publishing rights for underlying compositions are held by the studio or network that releases that product. So licensing stuff becomes a very serious issue. That's why they have floors full of lawyers at Universal Towers. These concepts are key to every kind of scoring or musical sync-to-picture issue, and they're just basically comes down to a couple of really common sense things. First of all, it's not like Photoshop, where you can take just time and throw things at the screen and create magic out of it. In order for you to really be effective as either the creative musical person or as the facilitator of the creative musical person who has been hired to do this, whether it's a score or a documentary or just temping in music, whatever, you need to understand the musical mission. And in order to do that, you need to know your client. You need to understand how to speak to them, and more importantly, how to understand what they're telling you. The most important thing you need to understand is that unlike doing stuff where you're making a record and releasing a CD and it goes out online and you sell it digitally and you sell CDs and whatever, Synchronizing music to picture is a whole other can of worms in terms of rights management and sync rights. And this is the thorniest, weirdest thing for people to understand if they're new to it, because there's actually two pieces to the puzzle. There are also two pieces to the puzzle in CD work, but it gets weirder in film and video because synchronization rights come into the picture. And the synchronization rights affect us in two ways. Number one, there is a master recording that has its own set of rights. But there is an underlying composition as well, whether it's an orchestral score or whether it happens to be a song that was written for the movie. Both of these have two sets of rights to deal with. And part of those rights, the master and the composition, are the synchronization rights.